everyone, I'm Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and today I'm going to do a nice, simple design with one of the new beads. A lot of bracelets can get kind of big and bulky, or designs can be really kind of intense. I decided to scale it down. I started this and was going to kind of add more and decided I really liked it the way that it was, nice and simple. It's a thinner bracelet, so if you would want to, you can actually make two wraps that it could wrap around twice, but I'm calling this the Cable Knit Bracelet. Looks like a cable knit sweater pattern. It's that time of the year, and the cable knit is a nice way to use this new Arcos bead. So if you haven't used the Arcos bead at all, this is the Arcos bead. It's a 3-hole arch-shaped bead. And if you need any of the materials, we'll do a little drop-down menu on the left-hand side here that you can link to the different materials that were used in this video, and you can purchase them from me online or write your list to go to your local Potomac Bead Company store. You can also, especially if you're on a mobile, you might not get that. Underneath the video, there's a description that says what the video is about. If you hit the little show more button on that, it'll give you links to all of the different materials as well if you did want to purchase them from me online. For the Arcos bead, again, it's that arch-shaped bead, and there's 3 holes in the arch shape. 1, 2, 3. 1 on each side and 1 down the middle, which is going to give us this fun kind of zigzaggy pattern that we're working with, or that cable knit pattern. For my example here, I have the mint luster, and then I have that vintage copper of my other bead, my Minos bead. For mine that we're going to be doing together, I'm going to use the Arcos in the pastel light brown color. It's almost like a silvery brown, a nice soft brown. In addition to the Arcos, the bead that was manufactured to go along with it is the Minos bead. So you can see the Minos bead is like a little barrel shaped, and here in the bracelet you can see it kind of on the side as well as facing straight up. It was designed to go exactly with the Arcos and fit exactly in the middle. So I decided for this design we'll keep it nice and simple and just do the Arcos and the Minos bead. So this is a Minos bead, and it's the metallic dark blue Minos bead that we're going to be using with that pastel light brown. Again, the one in the design here is that vintage copper if you want to make that minty green and vintage copper one. Along the edges, I'm going to be using some 15-0 seed beads. Here it's a galvanized light pewter. I'm going to be in the Toho brand, in the Miyuki brand. I'm switching to the Toho brand for my example here with this galvanized starlight, more of a bright gold, and I'm switching brands from the Miyuki to the Toho in the 15-0 size. Also, I decided that I wasn't super thrilled with the way that the Minos were sitting on the edges and on the sides here in between the design. So I'm going to switch to a Potomac Crystal Rondelle 2x3 millimeter. And this is the metallic blue color of that Crystal Rondelle. Also, anything that is right under 3 millimeter will work for this. So again, this is the 2x3. It's about 2.4, 2.5. You could even squeeze a 3 millimeter bead in there and you just won't use one of the seed beads. So I'll go over that if you have a different type of bead that you want to use. To close off the bracelet, I am going to be using a cup button. And this is the cup button in the crystal amber color to match my galvanized starlight. Doing those kind of nice fall blues. In addition to that, I have sitting here a size 12 English beading needle and some wildfire thread. I'm going to be using the wildfire thread in my white color in 0.006. I am only going to be using 1 needle for this project, so we will come back down the project from one side, add the clasp, and then go back to the other side as well. Having handy, great sitting near you is a wildfire cord cutter or a thread burner, thread zap ultra. You want a cord cutter. I like a cord cutter personally to get nice and close to the thread. It also burns down the end of the thread, creating a little ball. Because of that little balling, because of the conditioning on the threads, I also like to have a needle nose plier handy. I like to have a nice workable surface that's clean and kind of away from everything. I'm working here on a bead mat surface, but it's a nice bright white color. That way you guys can see what's going on. But I like my bead on it board. It's nice and portable. I can lift it up and kind of take it with me. So a bead mat or a bead on it board or a beading surface is really kind of essential to work with. To start the design, we're going to be going down the middle as well as adding some seed beads on the side, but I'm not going to add in the crystals yet until we kind of come back down the sides and kind of fill in. To get started, I want you to cut about 5 feet of your thread. If you do want to do this as a long one that you want to do about 14 inches and have it double wrap around your bracelet, or around your wrist rather, you're going to cut about 10 feet of beading thread. Put that on your size 12 needle and dump out your tubed beads, and we'll get ready to get started. So to get started, the first thing that I'm going to do is add a stop bead to my project. If you're not sure what a stop bead is, it's a bead that's going to come off the project that you're going to be just using basically temporarily as a knot to hold your beads from falling off. I just use an 8/0 seed bead that I had sitting around, or I'm sorry, 11/0 seed bead that I had sitting around on the side of my bead mat. You go through it one time and then through it the other time, which is going to result in 2 pieces of thread being on that little outer edge. To get started, the pattern is very simple. We are going to add a Minos bead. We are then going to go through the center of an Arcos bead. And you'll be able to see then exactly how those beads kind of fit together, that Arcos and Minos. We're going through the center of the Arcos, right through, oops, sorry, keep dropping it, right through the center of the Arcos here, and push that through on down to the stop bead. So you can see how that is perfectly designed to fit. When I'm on the side of my Arcos, I'm always going to be adding my 15s in that starlight color in groups of 3. I add 3 15s, and then I'm going to go through the upper hole of my Arcos bead. Sew through. When I'm through that, I'm going to add my next Arcos bead directly after it. So you can see you want that kind of zigzagging cable knit going. To do so, I'm going to sew down the Arcos through that first hole. So you may want to lay out your Arcos in kind of that pattern so you make sure to go the correct way, or just hold it next to the project that you're working on. When I sew it then from end to end, the archways are going to be going in opposite direction. Outside the end of the Arcos, add 3 of my 15s and sew through the middle of the Arcos, which is going to decorate the side of the Arcos, with those 3 15s. Give a nice tight pull, and that'll pull those down a little bit more. When I'm coming out the center of the Arcos, on goes a Minos, and the Minos kind of hang out in the middle. So it's time to cage that in, it's time to put another Arcos on. The Arcos, again, I'm getting the first hole, and I'm doing it in opposite direction. So I'm facing it down because the one below it is facing up. So a rainbow rather than the bowl. When I'm coming out the end here, on go 3 15s, and I'm going to sew through the middle of the Arcos. So always when you're coming out the sides of the Arcos, 3 15s go on, and those are just used there to separate. When I know that I'm coming out the center of one of the Arcos, rather the top or the bottom, that's when I always add one of my Minos. Once I'm through that here, if there's an empty hole across, you're going to sew through the empty hole right across the Minos, and that's going to sit those 2 Minos right next to one another. Coming out this last hole of my Arcos, you have nowhere to progress to unless you add another Arcos. So 3 15-0s go on because that's going to bridge our gap, and then we're going to get ready to put our next Arcos bead on. The Arcos always get added from end to end. So I'm going to add the Arcos on that very last hole facing in a bowl shape and go up through the last hole on the one that's the rainbow shape. Give a nice tight pull. Get that tail out of the way. And that's going to create that little arching effect. You kind of roll it back and forth around your bead mat or in your hand, your Minos will stick on up. When I'm coming out the end here of this Arcos, again, I'm on the very outer edge, and I know that I need to add my 3 15s because I always do that first. And I have nowhere else to go, so I need to add another Arcos. It's basically building blocks. I'm going to sew in from the rainbow down, and that's going to set my next Arcos. I'm sewing into one of the centers of this next Arcos, so I know I need to put on one of my Minos, because I always want to fill the center with the Minos. Go into the center then of the Arcos after putting on the Minos, and give a nice tight pull. I'm going to add the 15-os, 3 at a time, and I still have one more hole left in that Arcos there, so I know I'm just going through the Arcos and not adding another one. And when I come out the center, I realize that I'm going to be at the center of my next Arcos, so I have to add a Minos. So always, if you're sewing into the center of an Arcos, is when you add one of your Minos beads. Coming out that top then of the Arcos. Oops. Give it a nice tight pull. So it wants to sit up and cooperate. And the tension here will make them sit up and cooperate, so you want to give nice tight pulls. Add in 3 more of your 15-os. Sew down your Arcos bead, because you have one more hole there on the side, so you know that you have room to sew down. When you get out the Arcos bead, there's not another one there, so you know you're at the end, coming out the end. Time to add another one on. Going from the rainbow to the bowl shaped, down through to the base of the bowl, through that first hole. When I'm coming out the end, 3 go on, and there's another hole there, so I know I'm going through the middle. And then you say, oh, I'm out the middle, so I'm going to add my Minos on. After I add my little Minos on here, there's nowhere to go, so I know I need to add another Arcos on. So it's kind of like building blocks, that if there's a hole there, then you know that you can sew through the hole. If there's nothing there, you know it's time to add another one. On go 3 seed beads always, and down through the next hole the Arcos. So these are going to sit disconnected as you're looking at them. They kind of sit off and disconnected. That's going to occur the whole time until we get to the very end and run down the sides with our little crystals. The Arcos beads, when you're looking at them and when you're working with them, some of those, because of the manufacturing, and we were actually just talking about this and watching some of our YouTube videos on the manufacturing, sometimes you'll get a bead that because of the coating, the hole was clogged. I like to have a size 10 needle handy to kind of poke through that hole. That way you don't sit it aside and say, oh no, this one's unusable. Just try to poke some of that coating out and usually it'll come out for you. There are instances where it will not, but usually 95% of the time it comes out for you. I'm coming out the center of one of my Arcos. On goes a Minos, and down through the Arcos below. When I add my 3 15s, because I'm coming out of the Arcos, again, I'm getting ready to realize I have no Arcos to go into, so it's time to add another one. I'm going to go in from end to end, because I'm not sewing through any of the middle sections of any of the Arcos or coming out the middle of any of them. I know it's not time to add a Minos. Coming out the top, I have nowhere to progress to, but I know my 3 15s need to go on first, and then my Arcos bead. And it's really repetitive, and you actually don't have to think about it. Oh, sorry, went through the wrong way. You actually don't have to think about it really that much, other than times like that where you realize, oh no, I went through the wrong way because I needed to be inside rather than outside. Have that arch going on. On is going to go a Minos because I'm sewing into the center of the next Arcos. I'm pulling nice and tight. Adding my 3 15-os here. And you can use a size 12 needle or 10 needle too if you'd rather. Go into the last hole of that Arcos bead. And because I know I'm going to be sewing into the center of another one, that's when I add my Minos. I did forget to mention at the very start of the video, you will need about 30 to 39 of your Arcos beads. If you're doing a double wrap, you'll definitely want to purchase 2 tubes of them. but you'll be fine with 1 Minos. Make that cooperate and sit up and continue on. So again, it's very repetitive. You know, if you're coming out the center or going into a center, you add your Minos. Other than that, it's time to add another Arcos. You can see it's very free floating kind of after each rotation is done. It's actually groups of 4 that we're doing for Arcos, and then you kind of start that progression over and do another set of 4. We're going to come back down afterwards and link that cable knit together to really complete it and put our clasp on as well as we're doing that. So I'm coming out the very last bead for my length here, and I'm going to get ready to add my clasp. The bracelet does have some spring right now. It's not going to when we come back down the sides. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a lot closer kind of together, and you want to make sure that it fits you. I'm coming out one of my last of my Arcos beads, and I'm coming out on the outer edge. You're going to take 5 of your 15-0s and put them on your needle. Go up through the back of your cup button and out the top. When I'm out the top, I'm going to add one of my Minos beads and come down the button on the other side. That's just going to decorate the top there with one of those little Minos beads. If you want to, my bead is gold, or my button is gold here, so I didn't worry about it. If you want to, you can also put a 15-0 on either side of the Minos bead. That's up to you. I'm going to then be a big connection here from this underside or the bottom side to the top. To do so, I'm going to add my 5 seed beads like I did before. And then basically I need to bridge the gap, from one side to the other. So I have my 5 on there, which is going to end right near the initial 5. And then I'm going to add 4 more beads here. And we're going to start our sides by going on to the opposite side. So I started at the bottom, and now I'm connecting to the top. I did not reinforce that button clasp yet. I'll go ahead and reinforce that button once I come back through, because we're going to go down the project and then we're going to come back. So I have that nice link that it's creating kind of that gap, so that way my button sits straight. On the sides, when I'm working with the actual design, you want to have your crystals or your Minos ready to go. We're finished with the Arcos, and I'm going to kind of do the no-no here and just break the strand with my thread burner. Go in between those beads and just burn it down a little bit. And to come down the project, in between each of my 15-0 seed beads, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 more 15s. So pick up 3 15s and sew through your next group of 3 15s. Every 2 Arcos, then, there's going to be a gap. I'll show you in a minute, and that's where we add our crystal. So 3 Arcos go on, and you can see that fits kind of perfectly. 3 more go on. And you're going to connect to the other 3 that are there. Now you can see this gap here. You could continue if you wanted to with just the seed beads. This is where we're going to add in our crystal. So there's going to be gaps basically alternating every grouping of 4 beads. You can see that's where you're kind of disconnected. You add your crystal just for a little bling and then sew in. If you want to, you can do like I did in the example and just add the Minos bead, or you can even just add 3 more seed beads. Kind of up to you. That crystal just adds a little bit of shimmer. Then on the side, I'm going to continue again. Group of 3. And sew through the 3 existing beads that are already there. Add another grouping of 3. Sew through the 3 beads that are there. And then after those 2 groupings of 3, we add a crystal. It's very simple to come back down the project. If your crystal is a little bit too big or a little bit too small, you can make up for that with the counts of seed beads that you use on the initial first run. So all I'm going to do right now is go down this initial first side, adding in basically 2 groups of 3, and then my crystal bead, always sewing through those 3 beads. And that's going to really pull this project in together and make it look like one continuous cable knit line. So my 3 beads on, sew through the 3. And then after you add those 2 groupings of 3, those 6 beads, you're at the disjoined section and you add a crystal. So go ahead and continue adding in your seed beads and your crystals down this one first starting side. So I've gotten down this one right side here, and when I'm looking at the right side, I'm at the end. I started with a Minos bead just to kind of show you exactly what was happening and what was going on. I'm actually going to take off that stop bead at this point, and we're actually going to take off our last little Minos and Arcos. And that way my thread is exiting one of the Arcos beads. I'm not going to worry about a stop thread at this point. What I am going to do coming out this end here is create a loop for my clasp basically to sit in. To get centered and to get back to that kind of starting area, I am going to put on 4 of my seed beads and let those drop down around the edge of my Arcos. So they're going to kind of go right along the edge here. I'm going to take the starter thread at this point and tie it onto the thread that I'm working with right now. And this is basically just to bring those seed beads down there around the Arcos. If I wanted to, I could also take the thread through that inner hole. But I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of tie that thread in. After that, and I have that little tie there, I'm going to add one of my 11-0 seed beads. You can either add an Arcos or a crystal. I'm going to add a crystal for a little bling. And then I'm going to add a bunch of my, 15-0s. Bunch of my 15-0 seed beads. You could also do this pattern with 11-0s. You would just use 2 instead of 3 when you're doing all your groupings. I'm using enough seed beads now to make a loop that is going to be big enough for my cup button to fit through. So I'm going to add a bunch of seed beads here. Make sure that my loop is going to be big enough and just kind of test it out on my button. A couple more to add. And once you have those added, we're going to bring our thread and needle back through that crystal bead and give a nice tight pull. Get rid of any extra thread that's showing. And again, a nice tight pull. I'm going to sew back through that 15-0 seed bead that I added, pulling nice and tight again, and using this opportunity to tie onto that starter thread one more time. You can do this a number of different ways as far as kind of how to hold it all together. I want my loop to sit straight. So to get my loop to sit straight, I'm going to come down and connect it to the opposite side, and that's also how we're going to start coming down the opposite side. Before that, I'm going to go back through my whole loop that I did and reinforce it. To reinforce it, my thread's going back through the crystal as well as all the seed beads there in the loop. If you want to and you want to complicate it a little bit more, or make it look a little bit more complicated, I should say, it's not too complicated, you could do peyote stitch too right along this outer edge. If you like your loop to be with 11-0s, you can also just grab some 11-0s if you have them handy and use those as well. After going through the loop, I'm going to come out the crystal bead, and just like we did on the opposite side, I'm going to go from one side basically to the other. I'm coming out the crystal, not through that 15-0. Make that tail a little shorter. And I'm going to connect from one side to the other. So I'm going to add in my 15-0s. I have 8 15-0s on, and I'll bridge from one side to the other side. And that should make that loop then sit right on top for you. The nice thing too with the way that it is the button's on one side and the loop is on the other because I ended on opposite sides. Now simply continue that pattern of adding 3 beads, sewing through the 3 that are already here. And then as you come through, you'll see the little disjointed sections, and you'll add your crystal. So you can see kind of how it's taking shape. I'll continue recording until we add the crystal in. Excuse me, because of the way that the Arcos are, the crystals will always sit a little bit off from the one on the previous side. So it'll sit kind of zigzagged. So you can see it sits a little bit below there. And I'm just going to come down quick on the sides, adding in 2 groups of 3, and then my crystal, which is going to make my bracelet sit nice and straight. As I get to the end, I'm going to use 4 seed beads to decorate around that Arcos in place there, and kind of pull up my button loop and go through all of those beads as well as through my button. And this is my opportunity to reinforce my clasp. Kind of tuck those beads around the Arcos, through that Minos that's in there. And if you need to, you might need to wiggle your needle a little bit because of the way that the Arcos hole sits versus the cup button. And then down the opposite side. Also through all those seed beads. That's going to take 2 threads through your clasp. If you want to, you can even do a 3rd time. That's up to you. Once you're done, you can kind of see it sits nice and straight. And the cup button is going to go nicely into that loop. You want it just big enough that it sits. And it's kind of fun, like I said, they end in opposite sides. If you want to, you could also even put the cup button, if you did want it to look continuous, you could put the loop back here a little bit further, and then the button would sit pretty much right on top of the end and they would look like a continuous line. The reason I had said when we started, if you wanted to do something that's 2 wraps, is because it's actually not a very thick bracelet. That's one of the reasons that I like it so much, is that it's nice and thin. So if you did want to do 2 and kind of stack it, that you do 2 wraps, one on top of the other, it's going to stack nicely. When you're finishing, you just need to tie off your thread. The original starter thread is at the baseline, and we did already tie that one off. Here on the side, I'll bring the thread through some of the Arcos bead and basically do a sewer's knot, if you're familiar with that. I'll pick up some of the cross threads or some of the bridge threads. So underneath the bridge thread, creating a knot and sewing through that knot. And that's going to create that knot right there. Sew through my project, clear off to the other side, pick up another little edge thread or a warp thread, make a loop, sew through the loop, and create a knot. If I want to, I can go further back into the project, continuing and doing that same thing. I'm just going to burn down my thread end here with my thread burner, nice and close. And if you want to, you can grab some super glue glue and do a little dab of glue on it. I love this cable knit bracelet because of its simplicity. It really shows off the Arcos and the Minos bead, and the little crystal addition there is just kind of a nice little added to the end. Same thing on this side. I'm going to go in to the starter thread here and burn that down. And if you want to do a dab of glue there, you can as well. But I'm simply going to put mine on and wear it. Again, if you need any of the materials for this cable knit bracelet, you can go back to the beginning of the video to the little drop down menu, and it'll have links on the side for you if you are on a mobile phone underneath the video, or if you want to see it kind of written down and not have to go back to the video. Underneath the video box, there's always a description of the video. If you hit the little show more down arrow tab, you'll be able to see those and get links to all of the products as well to either make a list or purchase online, or go to your local Potomac Bead Company and see if they have the materials there as well. As always, if you enjoyed the video and you'd like to learn new patterns and new designs, you can always subscribe to this YouTube channel. I also do regular updates on products like the Arcos and the Minos when they come out to keep you connected with the beading world, what's new, what's hot, and what's trending. You can also interact with us on Facebook, as well as join our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making, and interact with a great community of beaders there that are jewelry artists and designers and hobbyists that love to make jewelry in all different mediums. You can also stay connected with us by visiting PotomacBeads.com. Check out the rest of these YouTube videos and have fun really creating, learning, and watching. As always, everyone, have fun making this cable knit bracelet, and thanks so much for watching me use the new Arcos and Minos beads in a very simplistic form.